What if the Great Flood didn't destroy evil, but destroyed something far more dangerous? What if it erased a civilization so advanced, so powerful, that humanity was never meant to remember it? And what if traces of that world still exist, hidden in simple sight? Welcome to Secret Origins, where history doesn't start where you were told it does. For most of our lives, the Great Flood has been presented as a simple moral story, a corrupt world, a divine warning, a single righteous family spared to begin again. Clean, simple, comfortable. But history is rarely comfortable, because when you strip away theology and look at the evidence, the flood begins to look less like a lesson and more like a global reset. And resets don't just remove bad data, they wipe everything. The most unsettling part isn't that the flood appears in ancient texts, it's where it appears. From Mesopotamia to India, from South America to Australia, from Nordic legends to Chinese chronicles, civilizations separated by oceans with no shared language, no contact, no trade, all describe the same sequence of events. A warning from a higher intelligence, a chosen survivor or family, a great vessel, animals and knowledge preserved, and a world reborn, fundamentally changed. Different names, same memory. That alone should stop us in our tracks, because myths don't spread like this, memories do. And memories usually hide something uncomfortable. Historians once dismissed the flood as symbolism, exaggerated storytelling inspired by local river floods. But that explanation collapses under scale. Over 200 cultures describe flooding so violent it reshaped coastlines, erased cities, and ended entire ages of history. If even a fraction of these accounts are rooted in reality, then we're not talking about a regional disaster. We're talking about a planetary event. And planetary events don't discriminate. They don't spare genius. They don't preserve technology. They erase societies. Here's where the question becomes dangerous. What if the flood didn't just reset humanity? What if it reset civilization itself? What if humans after the flood weren't pioneers, but survivors? What if early civilizations weren't inventing knowledge, but recovering fragments of something older? That would explain something archaeologists struggle with to this day. Across the world, the oldest structures are often the most advanced. Massive stone blocks, impossible precision, engineering methods that modern machinery still struggles to replicate. Later civilizations didn't build better, they built on top of something better. That is not how progress is supposed to work. Before we go further, this is where I'll ask you to subscribe, not as a routine call to action, but because what comes next challenges the official timeline of human history. If this topic interests you even slightly, you don't want to miss what follows. If a pre-flood civilization existed, human or otherwise, the Earth itself would remember. Rocks preserve pressure, sediment records chaos, landscapes freeze moments in time, and somewhere on this planet, those memories are still carved in stone. Which brings us to a place so scarred, so violent in appearance that scientists once refused to believe it was natural. A place that looks less like erosion and more like the aftermath of a planetary war.
We travel to a landscape carved not over centuries, but in days, and uncover geological proof that a flood of unimaginable force really did happen. And once you see what it destroyed, the official version of history will never feel the same again. If you wanted proof that the Earth has experienced floods beyond anything in modern history, you wouldn't find it in legends. You would find it carved into stone. In the northwestern United States lies a landscape so violent in appearance that early scientists refused to accept it as natural. Dry riverbeds wider than cities, channels ripped through solid rock, giant ripple marks, some as tall as buildings, frozen into the ground. This place is known as the channeled scablands, and for decades, no explanation made sense. According to traditional geology, landscapes change slowly. Rivers carve valleys over millions of years. Wind erodes stone grain by grain. But the scablands defied all of that. There were no rivers large enough to create them, no erosion slow enough to explain their shape, no timeline that fit the damage. Until one man proposed an idea so extreme that it nearly ended his career. In the 1920s, geologist J. Harlan Bretz suggested the impossible. He argued that the scablands were carved not by slow erosion, but by a single catastrophic flood, a wall of water hundreds of feet high, moving faster than hurricanes, drowning entire regions in a matter of days. The scientific community laughed. For nearly 50 years, Bretz was dismissed, mocked, and ignored. Then, technology caught up. Satellite imagery revealed massive dry channels stretching across entire states, scoured rock surfaces, gravel deposits scattered far from any river. Every piece of evidence pointed to one conclusion: Bretz was right. The event is now known as the Missoula floods, massive releases of glacial meltwater at the end of the last ice age. Entire landscapes were erased almost instantly, and suddenly, the idea of a world-changing flood didn't sound like mythology anymore. It sounded like history. But here's the problem no one likes to discuss. If floods of that magnitude happened once, they likely happened elsewhere. And if they happened elsewhere, they didn't just reshape land, they destroyed civilizations. Around 12,800 years ago, the planet experienced a sudden and violent climate shift known as the Younger Dryas. Temperatures dropped, ice sheets melted rapidly, sea levels surged. Some researchers believed this shift was triggered by a cosmic impact, fragments of a comet striking Earth, destabilizing the climate almost overnight. The result? Massive flooding, global chaos, and the sudden disappearance of advanced coastal societies. Think about where early civilizations would have thrived: along coastlines, near rivers, at trade routes and harbors. And what happens to coastal cities during rapid flooding? They vanish, buried under silt, swallowed by rising seas, erased from memory. This is why modern archaeologists have turned their attention underwater, and what they found is disturbing. Off the coast of India, in the Gulf of Cambay, sonar scans revealed geometric formations, straight lines, foundations, and grid-like patterns more than 100 feet beneath the ocean's surface. Some estimates date these structures to 9,000 years old. That places them thousands of years before the earliest known civilizations. Near Japan lies Yonaguni, a massive underwater structure featuring terraces, steps, and right-angled cuts that look eerily artificial. Mainstream science calls it natural, but divers, engineers, and even some geologists aren't convinced. Nature doesn't usually carve staircases. And in India again, the legendary city of Dwarka, long dismissed as myth, has yielded submerged walls and artifacts exactly where ancient texts said they would be. Coincidence or memory preserved in stone? Before we go any further, this is the moment to subscribe,
because what we're uncovering now isn't fringe speculation. It's physical evidence that challenges the accepted timeline of human history, and we're only getting started. Most of these underwater sites share one disturbing detail. They aren't slowly submerged, they're suddenly buried. Thick layers of sediment, debris consistent with violent water movement, signs of destruction, not abandonment. This suggests something fast, something overwhelming, something global. If cities across the world were wiped out almost simultaneously, then the flood wasn't a local disaster, it was a planetary reset. And resets don't leave survivors unmarked. We move from flooded land to impossible stone, uncovering ancient structures that shouldn't exist, built by cultures that shouldn't have been capable of building them. And once you see who may have built them, the idea of a pre-flood civilization becomes impossible to ignore.
After the floodwaters receded, the world didn't restart clean. It forgot. Entire chapters of history vanished, leaving humanity to rebuild on fragments it barely understood. And scattered across the planet are structures that feel less like inventions and more like leftovers. Leftovers from a world that shouldn't have existed. Across multiple continents, archaeologists have uncovered monuments that refuse to sit comfortably in the official timeline. They're too old, too precise, too advanced. And in nearly every case, the oldest layers are the most sophisticated. That alone should raise alarms. Take Göbekli Tepe in modern-day Turkey. Carbon dating places it at over 11,600 years old, long before agriculture, metallurgy, or organized cities were supposed to exist. Yet what stands there are massive stone pillars, some weighing over 20 tons, carved with intricate symbols and arranged in complex circular patterns. This wasn't a primitive camp. It was deliberate, engineered, planned. And the strangest part? After centuries of use, Göbekli Tepe was intentionally buried, as if someone was trying to preserve it or hide it. Then there's Pumapunku in Bolivia. Gigantic stone blocks cut with such precision they fit together like machine-made components. Perfect right angles, interlocking joints, tolerances so tight you can't slide a razor blade between them. Mainstream history claims these were built by a civilization without iron tools or even the wheel. So how? The pattern repeats again and again. In Egypt, the Osirion beneath Abydos is constructed with massive granite blocks that bear no resemblance to later dynastic temples built above it. In Lebanon, the Baalbek trilithon stones, each weighing over 800 tons, sit beneath Roman additions, not part of them. Later cultures didn't build these foundations, they inherited them. This creates a disturbing inversion of history. Instead of progress moving forward, we see regression. Earlier builders knew more. Later societies struggled to replicate their work. That is not how a young civilization behaves. That is how survivors behave. Before we go further, if this is already stretching your understanding of ancient history, make sure you're subscribed, because what comes next pushes the idea even further, beyond human timelines entirely. Many of these ancient sites show signs of catastrophic damage. Blocks displaced, structures fractured, entire complexes partially buried under thick layers of sediment. These aren't signs of abandonment, they're signs of sudden destruction, and water is a powerful suspect. So here's the question historians avoid. What kind of civilization was capable of building these structures and then vanishing almost overnight? Some researchers suggest a lost human civilization, advanced in astronomy, acoustics, and stone engineering. Others suggest something even more unsettling.
What if the civilization erased by the flood wasn't human at all? This idea sounds absurd at first, until you look at the fossil record. For over a century, dinosaurs have been portrayed as mindless giants, instinct-driven creatures with no real intelligence. But recent research is rewriting that narrative. Certain species exhibited complex social structures, long-term planning, and cooperative behavior. They returned to the same nesting grounds year after year. They guarded their young. They coordinated survival strategies. That requires memory, awareness, intelligence. One species, Troodon, stands out. It had a brain-to-body ratio comparable to modern mammals, forward-facing binocular vision, grasping hands capable of fine manipulation. Some paleontologists have openly speculated that given enough time, Troodon could have evolved into a highly intelligent, possibly humanoid species, a civilization cut short. Mainstream science attributes dinosaur extinction to an asteroid impact, but massive floods are also extinction-level events: ice melt, tectonic shifts, rapid sea level rise. What if the final blow didn't come from the sky, but from the oceans? If an intelligent, non-human civilization once existed, its cities would now lie beneath rock, sediment, and water, invisible to surface archaeology. Which brings us to an uncomfortable realization. We may be looking for the wrong ruins in the wrong places from the wrong species. In the next episode, we descend beneath the oceans to submerged cities, forbidden artifacts, and ancient knowledge that appears far too advanced for its time. And by the end, you'll have to ask yourself, did the flood erase one civilization or multiple civilizations at once? When cities sink, they don't just take stone and streets with them. They take knowledge. And yet, scattered across the ancient world are signs that something survived, fragments of understanding too advanced, too complete to belong to a so-called primitive humanity starting from zero. Which raises a final, unsettling question. If the flood erased civilization, why didn't it erase the knowledge? Across the oceans, underwater archaeology has begun to uncover shapes that should not exist naturally. Off the coast of India, in the Gulf of Cambay, sonar scans revealed geometric formations, straight lines, rectangular foundations, and grid-like layouts buried beneath thick layers of sediment. These aren't scattered rocks, they look like planned cities. Some estimates date them to nearly 9,000 years ago, predating the Indus Valley civilization by millennia. If those dates are even close to accurate, then advanced settlement existed before history officially began. Near Japan, the submerged structure of Yonaguni continues to divide experts. Terraced steps, sharp angles, flat platforms. Mainstream archaeology insists it's natural. But here's the problem. Nature doesn't repeat symmetry. Civilizations do. Then there is Dwarka, the legendary city said to have been swallowed by the sea after the death of Krishna. For centuries, it was dismissed as myth, until underwater excavations revealed walls, anchors, and man-made structures exactly where ancient texts said they would be. At some point, coincidence stops being coincidence. Before we go further, if you're still watching, this is the moment to subscribe, because what we're about to discuss doesn't just challenge archaeology, it challenges how we understand human intelligence itself. Physical ruins are only a piece of the puzzle. The more dangerous evidence lies in ancient knowledge. Take the Sumerians, often labeled the first civilization. Their earliest writings already contain advanced mathematics, precise astronomical data, and references to celestial bodies humans officially discovered thousands of years later. How does the first step look like the 50th? In Egypt, carvings at Dendera resemble electrical devices, sealed bulbs, cables, and energy symbols. In Bolivia, the gate of the sun appears to encode a solar calendar, more accurate than many modern systems. And then there's the Antikythera mechanism, a 2,000-year-old mechanical computer capable of predicting eclipses and planetary motion. Technology like that doesn't appear suddenly. It evolves, or it's recovered. Many ancient cultures speak openly about this. They didn't claim to invent knowledge. They claimed to be taught by sages, by survivors, by beings who remembered a world before the catastrophe. What if post-flood civilizations weren't pioneers at all? What if they were archivists, rebuilding fragments of a lost system without understanding the whole? This reframes everything. The flood didn't just destroy cities, it destroyed paradigms, systems of energy, science, and understanding that humanity has been trying to rediscover ever since. And worse, we may be missing the most important pieces. So where does that leave us? If advanced civilizations existed before the flood, human or otherwise, then history is not a straight line, it's a cycle. Rise, peak, collapse, forgetting, rebuilding. And the flood may have been the greatest reset of them all. One final thought. Every civilization that believed itself permanent wasn't. Every advanced society eventually assumed it had reached the top, and every one of them left behind ruins, warnings carved in stone, buried beneath water, waiting for someone curious enough to ask the wrong questions. If the flood erased a world more advanced than ours, what makes us so certain we're immune to the next reset? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And remember, history doesn't disappear, it waits.